In researching for today's message, I did some very scholarly investigation. So what I did is I took several online quizzes. You know, the kind that ask you if you were an animal, what animal would you be? Or if you were a place in your house, would it be the front door or the patio or the library, etc.? And one of the quizzes was, which patron saint has your personality type? And another was, what patron saint are you? And the result of both quizzes is that I am Saint Valentine. And the reason given was that I am always happy to help people and I have a deep appreciation for inner beauty. I'm a good listener and I know how to help people with their problems. And I give guidance and support whenever someone needs it. And I thought, that sounds like a minister. Good, I'm Saint Valentine. And then I discovered that he died a horrible death, that he was tortured and beheaded, and I decided I didn't really want to be Saint Valentine after hearing that. So he was a martyr. Many of the early saints were indeed martyrs, those who lived lives that were taken because of their commitments to their religious beliefs. But not all saints are martyrs. Today what we're going to do is look a little deeper into what a saint is and how we can be inspired by them in our daily lives. All Saints' Day was Wednesday, and many people celebrated this holy day. And I was curious, how exactly does one become a saint in the Catholic Church? So I want to go over the process of how someone becomes a saint. So here are the specific stages. First, you become servant of God. As soon as the person is accepted for consideration, she's called a servant of God. Those of you who are raised Catholic might already know this, but I was raised Protestant, so this was all new to me. The second step is venerable. After the Vatican Congregation for the Causes of Saints determines that the servant of God lived a life of heroic virtue, she is granted the title of venerable. Heroic virtue doesn't mean a person was perfect or sinless, but that she worked aggressively to improve herself spiritually and never gave up trying to better and grow in holiness. And then there is blessed. After the church establishes one miracle, the venerable person's cause is presented to the people, to the Pope, to see whether he deems her worthy of being called blessed. This step is called beatification and is the next to last step. And then there is saint, another miracle, and the blessed person's cause is presented to the Pope again for his judgment. If he determines that the evidence is clear and that contrary reports are not credible, he may initiate the canonization procedure, and if all goes well, the candidate is publicly recognized as a saint. Most of us do not believe in miracles the same way that the Catholics do, but many of us believe, as Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh does, that the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on this earth. Every day we are engaged in a miracle which we don't recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes, all is a miracle. So for many, saints are not only those who perform miracles or who are martyred or canonized, but people who are, in the words of Pope Francis, contagious examples of everyday holiness. Contagious examples of everyday holiness. Saints are people who live virtuous lives and call us to our highest selves. They are role models who are so possessed by an internal vision of goodness that they give us a glimpse of what is possible in ourselves. Recently, my husband and I got into a discussion about the morality of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. JD asked me if it mattered to me that Dr. King engaged in extramarital affairs. Did his messy personal life make him less of a hero in my eyes? Is he less of a great leader, a prophet, or what some people would call a saint? And I answered, no. In my opinion, Dr. King was a man who led an extraordinary life of service to God's people, and he was not perfect. But he was dedicated. He was dedicated and guided in his service by his love for humanity. And others agree with me. In fact, at the same time St. Teresa of Calcutta was sainted last year, Dr. King was sainted not by the Catholic Church, but by the Holy Christian Orthodox Church. Dr. King is an example of how we can do great things for our society, even in our imperfections. Perhaps he's not the best example of a virtuous man, but his failings make him relatable. Archbishop Timothy Paul thinks that Dr. King stands as an inspiration to people in difficult times. He states that Dr. King's life was centered on the gospel, as it was. It was centered on the gospel. The gospel inspired every major decision that he made. In fact, it was his dedication and his commitment to his theology of love and equality that got him killed. He could have backed down. He could have turned his back on his principles. He could have given up. But the fact that he didn't is proof of his devout and heroic nature. And this is why I consider Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. a saint. Even Mother Teresa was not without her critics. Some have questioned the hygiene and the medical standards that were adopted by the sisters in some of the clinics and the shelters that were run by Mother Teresa's charity. Others have criticized what they call a cult of suffering, that she was perhaps glorifying human suffering instead of relieving it. Also, she was quite dogmatic in her beliefs around abortion and divorce and contraception. According to a French university professor, Serge Levery, Mother Teresa's image of altruism is a myth. Even so, he acknowledges the power of her extraordinary reputation. It is likely, he says, that she has inspired many humanitarian workers whose actions have truly relieved the suffering of the destitute and addressed the causes of poverty and isolation. So I am not a critic of Mother Teresa. I believe that she was a brave, dedicated woman who worked tirelessly to improve the lives of the oppressed. And she reminded us what a saint is. Keep in mind, she said, keep in mind that our community is not composed of those who are already saints, but of those who are trying to become saints. Therefore, let us be extremely patient with each other's faults and failures. Let us be extremely patient with each other's faults and failures. The esteemed psychologist Abraham Maslow reminds us that there are no perfect human beings. Persons can be found that are good, very good, great in fact. There do in fact exist creators, seers, sages, saints, shakers, and movers, and yet those very same people can at times be boring, irritating, petulant, selfish, angry, and depressed. To avoid disillusionment with human nature, we must first give up our illusions about it. Saints are ordinary people who happen to be extraordinarily human. Reverend Craig Nowand believes that ordinary saints among us are living embodiments of these words. They are profoundly human people who remind us that we are co-authors in life, whose choices determine the outcomes of our stories and ultimately the meaning of our lives. The ordinary saint possesses a deep and abiding awareness of the interconnectedness, our seventh principle, the interconnectedness of all of life, and it acts accordingly. They are companions guiding us by example. One of the pitfalls well-meaning people fall into in the face of the world's suffering, the overwhelming suffering, is to focus on the magnitude of the problem. But doing so only increases our likelihood of becoming trapped in a vicious cycle of powerlessness and inertia. Instead, we might learn the way of the ordinary saint. The ordinary saint learns to see with clarity, discerns what is truly possible in a given moment, and then responds to that awareness because it matters. The ordinary saint refuses to condemn human kindness to ugliness. He or she reveals to us the beauty of all we possess, beauty which resides in our entire selves, our nerves, in our muscles, in our histories, in our minor choices. So I wonder, who are the ordinary saints in your lives? Who has been a hero or a heroine for you? I think of one of my mentors, the late Reverend Marjorie Bowens Wheatley, who served this congregation as the called, settled minister for several years, and then got cancer and passed away in 2006. She appreciated what she called the beauty of our faith. She once wrote, "What is the strength of our religious liberalism if not to truly encourage a free and responsible search for one's own truth, and to translate the great truths of the world, whether religion or science or literature, in ways that people can hear? What is our liberal faith for if not to teach respect for difference?" Marjorie taught me the ministry of multiculturalism and the importance of creating a liberal religious community that is welcome to all people. We worked together in the creation of many multi-generational worship services and religious education lessons. She was honest and courageous and creative and brilliant. And when I stood on the stage of General Assembly, our annual gathering of UUs across the country, during the service of the Living Tradition, and I was recognized for receiving preliminary fellowship, I thought of Marjorie. She helped me fill out my first seminary application a long time ago. Seems like it's almost been, 16 years? And encouraged me to pursue the ministry. I am where I am today because of her guidance and her commitment to our faith. I miss her deeply. I also think of my father, who is still alive, and he would get a kick out of me comparing him to a saint, but in my eyes, he is. He overcame the horror of being a foot soldier, a grunt, in the Vietnam War. And I know that he lives with that pain in those images every single day of his life and continues to function. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he came home and he started a family and he supported us and made it a priority to provide for us. I was raised in a home full of love, and Lord knows I tried his patience. And he loved me through some of the hardest times of my life, my teenage years. I'm not looking forward to the teenage years. Because if my son is anything like I was so defiant. And I defied my father and I disrespected him. And he loved me anyway, and he took care of me. And I think that most parents deserve the title of saint. So I wonder, what saints do we have in our UU tradition? Who are our heroes? Those who epitomize excellence and personify goodness, bravery, courage, commitment. What models do we hold up for ourselves and for our children? In a sermon preached by Reverend Lee Blumel, he proposes that we do establish sainthood in the Unitarian Universalist Association. I'm not sure what that process would look like. Considering how lengthy the process is in the Catholic Church, I don't think it would go on that long in our congregations. Perhaps we would vote on them at General Assembly. If we look into our history, it is not difficult, though, to find many Unitarians and Universalists who would qualify as saints. Perhaps our patron saint of healers and the sick is Universalist Clara Barton. I'm not going to quiz y'all. I'm just going to let y'all know. I've got a couple of others. If you know it, if you have an idea, just shout it out. So Clara Barton, y'all might know Clara Barton. You might not have known that she was a Universalist. She nursed victims of the Civil War. She became known as the Angel of the Battlefield. Following the war, she organized the search for an identification of missing men. On a later trip to Europe, she became associated with the International Red Cross and was successful in finding an American chapter here in 1881. It was also Barton who got the United States to sign the Geneva Convention related to victims and prisoners of war, and expanded Red Cross, the American Red Cross, to provide relief for whatever disasters may occur, not just war. And because she was a Universalist, she extended her service to all the wounded, sick, and stricken, no matter what their side was in the war, and no matter what their country. Perhaps our patron saint of science is Joseph Priestley. Priestley is best known for his discovery of oxygen and soda water, but what is noteworthy for us is his thirst for knowledge and his understanding that scientific questions and religious questions are linked. He believed that a proper understanding of the natural world would promote human progress. Priestley, who strongly believed in the free and open exchange of ideas, advocated toleration and equal rights for religious dissenters. That would be us. Which also led him to help find Unitarianism in England. How about, I know y'all are going to get this one. How about the patron saint of naturalists and those who love the earth? Thoreau. Emerson would be one as well, but Thoreau. I was thinking Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau is one of the people who drew me to Unitarian Universalism. I read about the Transcendentalists, Emerson and Thoreau and Margaret Fuller and those folks when I was in high school in my literature class, and I really related to his love of nature and his spirit of civil disobedience. Thoreau was an abolitionist, and he believed that it is our responsibility to speak out against injustice. He adhered to the fundamental transcendentalist principle that there is a higher law than the civil law, and that when there is a conflict between the two, it is the citizen's duty to heed the voice of conscience rather than participate in oppression. Amen? Amen. It is important for us to recognize the deep human need for models that show us different ways of living meaningful lives. Many of the world's religions have leaders who guide the people. Christianity has saints. Jewish folks have righteous ones and patriarchs and prophets. Buddhists have bodhisattvas. Muslims have prophets. In the introduction to the book entitled Saints and Virtues, John Stratton Hawley reminds us that the great religions did not gain their hold on us by precepts alone. Within each religion, a powerful body of tradition emphasizes not codes, not just the codes and the rules and whatnot, but stories. Not just the precepts, but personalities. Not lectures, but lives. I heard a story of a single dad who was new to his community, and so he decided to take his 7-year-old to church one day. And it was a church that he had never been to before, and he did not know when religious education met or how anything worked. He didn't look that up beforehand. So he brought his child into a worship service with him. And the minister came to the pulpit and preached a sermon about the saints. He talked about the history of Christianity. People like Peter and James and Martha and Mary, people who knew Jesus personally. He talked about the early fledgling church and about the people who laid the foundation for the church. He talked about people who lived over 1,000 years later who challenged others to look at faith differently and find a deeper relationship with the holy. He talked about modern day saints such as Gandhi, Rosa Parks, Dr. King, who struggled for the rights of all people. While all this was going on, the little boy was fascinated by the stained glass windows that were lined the ceiling of the sanctuary. And it was a very bright, sunny day, so he was overcome by the colors. It was as if a rainbow had shattered and covered the congregation with radiant shapes of purple and blue and red and yellow and green. The colors that were reflected by the people that were in the windows, some of the same people that the minister had mentioned in his homily. The colors were beautiful, and they filled the church. After the service, when they were driving home, the father asked the son what he thought of the church service. "I liked it," he said. "Were you listening to the sermon that the minister was preaching at all?" "A little," the boy admitted. "Do you know what he was talking about?" the father asked. The boy confirmed that the sermon had something to do with people called saints. Testing how awake and attentive his son was, the father then asked, "And who are the saints?" And the boy said, "They are the people that the light shines through." They are the people that the light shines through. The saints are not just those who have done dramatic things in history, fighting for the rights of all people in their faith. They are those who have helped us open our eyes to see God in our midst. On All Saints' Day, we are reminded of those great cloud of witnesses, as it is described in Hebrews 12, who have gone before us and who sustain us on our journey. They rely on us to carry forth their commitments and ideals. Sometimes the veil is lifted and we can feel the presence of those gone before us. I loved that story that you read about the invisible string, because that's what I feel with this great cloud of witnesses. When I participate in public witness or marches or prayer vigils, I feel a connection to all those people who came before me, who worked so hard for civil rights, for human rights, for the dignity of all people. I feel them with me. Unitarian Universalists have always been on the front lines of social justice reform, and when we speak up, we are continuing the legacy of the saints who refused to accept that the way things are the way things are supposed to be. It is important for us to remember and honor the heroes of our lives and our faith. We all have the potential. We all have the potential to be saints for one another. We are called to imitate the lives of those who teach compassion and justice and hope. We need hope. We need hope so badly in these days. And those who served humanity with love, we look at them as examples. Let us pause. Let us pause and reflect on the ordinary saints in our lives. Let us be more aware and appreciative of those who the light shines through, those who are instruments of love and service. It is true that some of us will do more than others. Some of us have more to give, but we all have a responsibility to live lives of great intention. On this All Saints' Day, let us give thanks for those who have made an impact on our lives. Let us, in the words of John Murray, go out into the highways and the byways. Give the people something of your new vision. You may possess only a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and more understanding to the hearts and minds of people. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Do not push them deeper into their theological despair, but preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. So may it be. Because of those who came before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their visions, we too dream. Go in peace.